There comes a moment in every person's life when the noise begins to fade. The opinions of others become quieter. The endless chase for approval becomes exhausting, and for the first time, you are left alone with your own thoughts. Many people fear this moment, not because silence is dangerous, but because silence reveals. It reveals the wounds we hide, the fears we avoid, the questions we never dared to ask ourselves. Who am I when nobody is watching? What do I truly believe? What kind of person am I becoming? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary questions, because a life without reflection is often a life lived according to someone else's expectations. Most people spend years learning about the world. They study trends. They study success. They study other people. Yet they never take the time to understand themselves. And that is where many become lost. Because if you do not know yourself, the world will tell you who to be. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that external success means very little if a person remains a stranger to himself. Marcus Aurelius was one of the most powerful men in the world, yet he spent much of his life examining his own mind. Think about that. An emperor surrounded by wealth, power, and influence still believed that understanding himself was one of the greatest responsibilities of life. Why? Because he understood something many people forget. You can conquer cities and still be lost. You can gain admiration and still feel empty. You can possess everything the world offers and still lack peace. Real peace begins within. And that journey inward is not always comfortable. Sometimes you discover anger, sometimes regret, sometimes fear, sometimes pain that has been waiting years to be acknowledged. But healing begins where honesty begins, and honesty requires courage. The courage to stop pretending, the courage to admit your weaknesses, the courage to face the truth. Many people spend their lives trying to escape themselves through distractions, through endless entertainment, through constant noise, anything to avoid being alone with their thoughts. But the soul cannot be healed through avoidance. It can only be healed through understanding. This is where silence becomes a gift, because silence forces you to confront reality. It forces you to sit with your thoughts, to question your beliefs, to examine your heart. And while that process can be painful, it is also transformative, because every meaningful transformation begins with awareness. You cannot change what you refuse to see, and you cannot grow beyond the person you refuse to understand. This is where faith becomes essential, because there are moments when self-knowledge reveals things we cannot fix on our own. Moments when our strength feels insufficient. Moments when our answers seem incomplete. Moments when life becomes heavier than expected. And in those moments, faith reminds us that we were never meant to carry every burden alone. Faith is not the absence of struggle. Faith is the decision to keep walking despite the struggle. It is choosing hope when certainty is unavailable. It is believing that meaning exists, even when you cannot yet see it. Sometimes God works in ways that seem invisible, not because He is absent, but because transformation often happens beneath the surface. Like a seed growing underground, nothing appears to be happening, yet everything is changing. Perhaps the same is true for you. Perhaps you look at your life and see little progress. Perhaps you feel stuck. Perhaps you wonder whether your efforts matter. But growth is often quiet. Wisdom grows quietly. Character grows quietly. Faith grows quietly. And some of the most important victories happen where nobody can see them. The victory of choosing patience over anger. The victory of choosing forgiveness over resentment. The victory of standing back up after disappointment. The world rarely applauds these victories, but they are victories nonetheless. The Stoics taught that adversity is not merely an obstacle, it is also a teacher. Every challenge asks a question. Will you become bitter or wiser? Will you surrender or grow? Will you allow suffering to define you or refine you? Your answer shapes your future, and perhaps that is why hope is so powerful. Hope is not naive. Hope does not ignore reality. Hope looks directly at hardship and chooses to move forward anyway. It says, I may not understand everything. I may not have all the answers, but I refuse to stop believing. And maybe that is what you need to hear today. You do not need every answer right now. You do not need a perfect plan. You do not need complete certainty. You only need the courage for the next step. One step, then another, then another. If life feels heavy today, remember this. You have survived difficult days before. You have endured moments you once thought would break you. And somehow, you are still here, still breathing, still learning, still becoming. Perhaps there is more strength within you than you realize. Perhaps the chapter you are living right now is not the end of your story. Perhaps it is the chapter that is preparing you, preparing your mind, preparing your character, preparing your soul. Because growth rarely happens during comfort. Growth happens when faith is tested, when patience is tested, when hope is tested, and yet you continue. One step, then another, then another. One day, you will understand. The pain was not your enemy. The silence was not your enemy. The waiting was not your enemy. They were all teachers, teaching patience, teaching wisdom, teaching faith, teaching you how to stand firm when life becomes uncertain. And when you finally arrive at the place you were meant to be, you will look back at the darkness that once frightened you, the nights you cried alone, the moments you doubted yourself, the seasons when you questioned everything. And instead of cursing those moments, you will thank them, because they shaped you, because they strengthened you, because they revealed parts of your soul that comfort could never reveal. It was there, in the silence, in the struggle, in the uncertainty, that your soul learned how to see, that your faith became deeper, that your character became stronger, that your hope became real. So do not lose hope. Do not surrender your faith. Do not allow temporary darkness to convince you that light no longer exists. Keep walking. Keep believing. Keep growing. Even when progress feels invisible. Even when answers seem distant. Even when the road ahead is hidden. Because not all growth can be seen. Some of the most important transformations happen in silence. The night may be long, but morning has never failed to arrive, and neither will your time. Trust the process, trust the lessons, trust the journey, and above all, never stop believing that your story is still being written.